They didn't come with warning. They didn't knock. They didn't shout. But they came, not with fists or fire, but with whispers, with names etched into cloth, with intentions soaked in envy, pressed between candlelight and shadow. They came for your peace, for your clarity, for your light, and they didn't come alone. They brought rituals older than memory, energy twisted into malice. They chanted in silence, they smiled in daylight, and they pointed all of it at you. Why? Because your light disturbed their sleep. Because your voice, even when quiet, echoed too loudly in realms they tried to control. Because every room you entered felt heavier after you left. Not from your burden, but from the truth you carry. They saw you and thought, too bright, too honest, too free, too protected. So they reached for what they thought would stop you. They tried black magic. No, not the movie kind. Not the candles and red smoke for show. This wasn't fantasy. This was energy, twisted and aimed with one goal: to break you. And maybe, for a moment, it felt like it worked. Things started falling apart without reason. People you loved began to pull away. Doors that once opened for you stayed shut. You couldn't sleep. Your body grew heavy. Your spirit began to question itself. And still, no one saw it. No one could explain it. Because this wasn't a physical attack. This was spiritual warfare in its purest, most silent form. But what they didn't know, what they could never predict, was that you were never alone. Yes, they sent something dark, but something older, stronger, sacred stood in front of you, something invisible but unmovable. And when the curse came, it collided with a force they never factored in: divine interception. Your name may have been whispered with malice, but it was already spoken in sacred places, by ancestors, by protectors, by the very fabric of the universe. The curses came, but they couldn't land. Not the way they intended. Yes, you felt the pressure. Yes, it shook you. Yes, it almost took you under. But someone held the line. And chosen one, you need to know this. That wasn't luck. That wasn't random. That wasn't just a phase. It was protection, real, present, active. They tried to send energy to break your path, but your path had already been sealed. And not by your doing, but by divine agreement. From the beginning, there was something different about you. Not louder, not better, but different. You came with frequencies they couldn't decode, with codes they couldn't copy, with a mission too sacred to be stopped by the envy of the lost, and they knew it, even before you did. That's why they tried early. That's why the attacks came in waves, not just once, not just from one face, but again and again, cloaked in kindness, wrapped in concern, veiled behind smiles that never reach the eyes. Because the most dangerous attackers are the ones who look like friends, act like lovers, speak like family. They watched your growth not with celebration, but calculation. They studied you, learned your rhythms, waited for your weakest moments. And when they thought you were vulnerable enough, they struck. But something didn't let them finish, because while they were weaving curses, you were awakening. While they were burying intentions, your soul was rising to meet itself. You didn't even know it at first. You just felt the weight, the sudden dread, the unexplainable fog that clouded your thoughts and dreams. You thought it was anxiety. You thought it was fatigue. You blamed yourself, but the truth was deeper. You were under spiritual siege, and yet you woke up every single day. Even when you couldn't find the strength to smile, you breathed, you kept moving, you kept hoping, and that's what they never accounted for. Because black magic doesn't just need hatred, it needs hopelessness. It needs agreement. It needs you to surrender, and you didn't. Even when your hands shook, even when your mind screamed, even when your heart cracked open from unseen blows, you stayed standing. And that standing, that was your rebellion. They tried to curse your name into silence, but your very breath became your resistance. And here's what you must understand now. You were never supposed to win by fighting. You were supposed to win by remaining. Remaining light, remaining love, remaining aware of the truth that cannot be hexed, that you are chosen, marked, coded, covered, and the force that covers you is older than their hatred, wiser than their rituals, stronger than anything they've summoned. You were protected, not just from them, but for something, for what comes next, for what your life is about to become. Because the protection wasn't passive. It didn't just block, it transformed you. It burned away the parts of you that still trusted too easily. It severed ties that would have drained your future. It closed doors that hid curses behind opportunity. And in that burning, something new emerged. Not a victim, not a survivor, but a being made of flame, unshaken, reborn. You are not just protected now. You are the protection, and they feel it. That's why they're watching from a distance now, why their words don't reach, why their energy can't penetrate, because you no longer live where they sent the darkness. You've risen beyond the reach of what once bound you. And this is just the beginning. Not all battles happen in the dark. Some happen in broad daylight, in warm hugs, in kind words, in familiar voices that wrap around your soul like velvet until they tighten. Chosen one, this is the part they never warned you about, that not all spiritual attacks wear black robes. Some wear best friend laughter, some cook you dinner, some hold your hand during prayer, and still carry intention as sharp as daggers behind their backs. Because the war against your light didn't always come from strangers. It came from those close enough to touch your essence. They didn't shout, they studied, they didn't strike. They softened, and then they drained. Not all harm is loud. Sometimes it walks in with a smile and sits at your table. They were never going to say, "I came to curse your path." No, they came with praise. They came with compliments. They came with concern. But energy never lies, and at some point your body knew. Before your mind caught up, before your heart could admit it, your body flinched around them, your energy shrank, your dreams shifted, your breath changed. You didn't want to believe it, because how do you look someone in the eyes and say, "You're hurting me," without laying a hand on me? How do you explain that the pain isn't in what they said, but in what they meant? You were being watched, not in admiration, but calculation. They took notes. What made you glow? What broke your rhythm? What softened your strength? What made you hesitate? And then they mirrored it all. They didn't just attack your body. They studied your patterns. They learned your vulnerabilities, and they fed them back to you as concern, as guidance, as advice. But chosen one, your soul knew. Even when your logic argued, your spirit whispered, something isn't right. It wasn't paranoia, it was perception, and they hated that you could feel them before they moved. Because your gift is not just discernment, it's sensitivity to truth. And in a world full of actors, truth is offensive. They wanted access to your light without responsibility for how they handled it. And when they realized they couldn't own you, they decided to destroy what they couldn't control. But still, you kept giving, because your heart is loyal even in fog, because your hope believes people can change, because your love doesn't know how to stop caring without grief. And they counted on that. They bet on your forgiveness, on your softness, on your willingness to carry what they refused to heal in themselves. So you absorbed. You carried their shadows. You tried to shine for them, not realizing they were blocking your sun. You tried to make excuses for why your energy felt off, why your blessings started delaying, why your peace became paper thin, why your joy didn't stick anymore. But your soul was screaming, "This is not confusion, this is invasion." You weren't just tired, you were spiritually breached, because the war was never just outside of you, it was crawling through the cracks of relationships that wore love like a costume. But here's the miracle you noticed. You felt the weight and questioned the source. You saw the smiles and doubted the eyes. You started pulling back, not from fear, but from knowing. And the moment you did, they panicked. Because their power relied on your access. Your trust was the portal, your presence the permission. But when you began to reclaim your space, they lost their grip. And yes, some of them turned colder. Some vanished. Some turned others against you. Some painted you as the villain in their version of the story. Let them. Let them rewrite your kindness as betrayal. Let them mislabel your boundaries as arrogance. Let them twist your silence into guilt. Because none of that can overwrite what your spirit already knew, that you were being protected, not just from them, but through them. They exposed themselves without knowing it. Their inability to sit in your light revealed what lived in their shadows. They didn't just leave, they were removed, because spirit saw what your heart refused to, because the higher path cannot carry dead weight. And you weren't just being betrayed, you were being cleansed. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it broke something inside you, but what cracked wasn't your soul. It was the illusion you kept alive to make them look safe. And now you see who drains, you see who inspires, you see who pretends, you see who prays, you see everything, because your intuition is no longer clouded by guilt. You no longer feel bad for walking away, for going silent, for choosing yourself, for saving your light, because that light, the one they tried to dim, was never meant to be shared without sacred discernment. You're not unkind, you're aware, and awareness is your new armor. So if you've lost people lately, if your phone is quieter, your circle smaller, your energy protected, rejoice. The war behind the smiles has ended, and you didn't need to expose them, you just needed to heal. And now they can't find the version of you they wounded, because that version no longer lives here. This is the version covered in clarity. This is the version that doesn't bend at the sound of empty affection. This is the version that remembers. Your glow isn't a gift for those who dishonor it. You are still chosen, still protected, and now you are also awakened. And the ones who once moved like shadows, they now move like echoes, distant, fading, powerless. Because chosen one, you no longer live where deception thrives. You have entered truth, and in truth no curse can stay. There were nights that didn't feel like night. They felt like endings. Moments when the weight around your chest didn't lift for days. When the air in your own home felt foreign. When silence stopped being peaceful and started sounding like pressure. Chosen one, they thought that would be it. They thought the darkness they sent would be enough to swallow your name. They believed. The confusion they summoned would unravel your path completely. And for a moment, it almost did. You questioned your worth. You doubted your voice. You forgot your strength, not because you were weak, but because you were under siege. What they sent wasn't just shadows. It was designed distortion, spiritual. Sabotage dressed in circumstances, coded chaos, camouflaged as coincidence. The delay in that blessing, not random. The sudden pull of exhaustion, calculated. The opportunity that dissolved without reason, engineered. They didn't want to harm your body. They wanted to fracture your alignment. Because when the chosen forget who they are, they stop radiating the frequency that protects them. And so they hoped you'd crumble quietly. No funeral, no fall. Just a slow unraveling under the weight of invisible things. But here you are, breathing, walking, knowing. Not because the storm wasn't real, but because something ancient stood in the eye of it with you. Let's not sugarcoat it. It was hard. It broke things inside you that may never return. There were moments you weren't sure if you'd wake up the same, and maybe in some ways you didn't. Because pieces of you, the overgiving, the blind trusting, the unguarded, were never meant to survive this version of your evolution. You had to lose what made you easy to wound. And every time the energy came, you felt it, the sudden drop in your mood, the irrational self-blame, the impulse to isolate, to shut down, to self-destruct quietly. Those weren't mood swings, they were psychic intrusions. Their curses didn't come with fire and brimstone, they came with static, with haze, with fatigue that no sleep could cure. But your soul, your eternal memory, it refused to agree. And that refusal, that's why you're still here. Because light doesn't need to shout to win. It just needs to remain. And you did. You remained in pieces, but you remained. You remained confused, but conscious. You remained grieving, but grounded. And in that sacred remaining, you broke their strategy. They needed you to give up. They needed you to say, maybe I am cursed. They needed you to align with the energy they sent, but you didn't. Instead, you whispered, I don't know how, but I'll make it. And that whisper? That was a spiritual war cry. It echoed through dimensions. It activated protection you didn't even know you had. Your ancestors stirred. Your angels drew closer. The unseen stepped in because the darkness they used had a timeline. But your calling, your protection, your mission is eternal. And now the veil is thinning. The truth is surfacing. What once moved undetected is now revealing itself. People are slipping, intentions are showing, masks are falling, because your light has reached a frequency where deception cannot survive. And they feel it. They know the energy no longer works on you. They know the manipulation has lost access. They know the version of you who once bowed in confusion has been replaced by a soul forged in fire. That's the part they never calculated. They thought the attacks would break you, but they activated you. They thought the pain would mute you, but it became your pitch, your note, your resonance. They thought the darkness would consume you, but instead, you learned how to see in it. And now you move with vision, with discernment, with a voice that doesn't just speak, it commands frequency, and they can't stand it. Because every time they remember what they did, they are met not with your destruction, but your transformation. You didn't just survive, you evolved, and that evolution is untouchable, not because it's loud, but because it's complete. You're no longer reachable by what once found you vulnerable. You are no longer open to what once drained you, because the spiritual war didn't just protect you, it trained you. You now walk with eyes behind your spirit. You sense what others ignore. You pause before allowing access. You wait before answering calls not meant for your energy. You are no longer their easy target. You are their karmic return. Chosen one, remember, the nights you almost didn't make it were not failures. They were rites of passage. They were initiations. Every fall was sacred. Every breakdown was a door. Every delay was protection. Every no was redirection. And now that you know, now that you remember, you no longer fear the dark because you've been through worse. You no longer beg for light because you've realized you are it. They never saw it, they never could, because what stood between you and their curse wasn't loud. It didn't strike like thunder. It moved like breath, like wind between the realms. Chosen one, what blocked the darkness they sent was not just defense, it was design. This was never about reaction, it was always about preparation. Before they ever lit their candles, before they whispered your name into mirrors, before they stirred. The waters with intentions soaked in bitterness. Something had already risen to meet them. And it wasn't by accident, because you weren't just protected, you were known. Known by realms that never forget. Known by ancestors who still walk with purpose. Known by the intelligence that moves stars and splits seas. You were never outnumbered, never exposed, never forgotten, because before they moved in darkness, light had already taken position. It stood beside you when your eyes couldn't see. It whispered when your ears only heard silence. It intervened when your plans were falling apart, not to punish you, but to reposition you. Because what they sent could have reached you, but it didn't, not because you were lucky, but because you were claimed. Do you know what that means? It means there is something about your spirit that heaven refuses to release. It means there are assignments attached to your name that override ordinary interference. It means that when energies began swirling around you with harm, divine force said, not this one, not now, not ever. And yes, there were moments it felt like you were slipping, moments when you could barely breathe, when your mind raced and your chest sank. When everything felt disconnected, like you were floating in an ocean of nothing. But even then, something held you. It wasn't loud, it didn't introduce itself, it just moved, silently, faithfully, completely. It tangled itself around the arrows they sent. It caught every whispered curse mid-air. It rerouted spells into smoke. They thought it failed because you didn't fall. They thought their aim was wrong. But the truth is, you were never open, because something ancient had sealed you, not because of what you did, but because of who you are. You're not just someone passing through life, you're a beacon, a portal, a reminder, and your light didn't just illuminate, it disrupted. That's why they reached for darker tools, because ordinary manipulation didn't work. Words didn't twist you, distance didn't shake you, silence didn't erase you. So they escalated, they summoned, they pulled energy from forgotten corners, trying to silence the thing they couldn't name. But energy remembers, frequency knows. And the divine, it doesn't ask for permission, it moves to preserve its own. And you, chosen one, you carry divine codes in your being. That's what protected you, not just energy, but assignment. And when you carry divine purpose, you also carry divine protection. You see, what they sent didn't disappear. It just had nowhere to land because your field, the space around your soul, was already occupied by ancestors who fought in silence, by guides who lit fires around your name, by angels who don't need wings to defend, by a destiny that refuses to break. Some of them still don't understand. They wonder why their intentions didn't manifest, why others fell, but you remained. And it bothers them, because they sent real things, dark, ancient things, and still, you rose. You rose disoriented, but you rose. You rose unsure, but you remembered, because your protection wasn't passive. It wasn't just shielding, it was shaping. You didn't just survive. You were being sculpted, and in that process, old pieces broke away. Old patterns shattered, old alliances dissolved, and in the middle of the chaos, you became someone new. Not because you asked for transformation, but because protection required it. You see, some blessings come softly, but protection comes like fire. It removes what you won't, it ends what you tolerate, it silences what you excuse, and it protects not just your life, but your future. That's what happened. You thought the losses were random, you thought the pain was punishment, but really, they were exits, forced by forces greater than you to prepare a space clean enough for your next becoming. And now that you know, now that you see, you don't have to doubt your worth again. You don't have to chase validation. You don't have to wonder if you're still covered. You are, and not just for who you've been, but for who you are becoming. Chosen one, what stood between you and destruction was not just power. It was love, purpose, eternal memory. You are not here by accident, and you are not here alone. They tried, but something sacred said, not this soul, not today, not ever. They didn't want to destroy you, not completely. They wanted you dimmed, softened, quieted, small enough to exist, but not enough to be seen, because your light wasn't just inconvenient, it was revealing. It showed too much, it made shadows nervous, it stirred things they wanted to keep buried. Chosen one, they never feared your voice. They feared what would happen if you ever believed it. So they surrounded you with noise, so much noise, you forgot what your own frequency felt like. Voices telling you to stay humble, to be nice, to forgive again and again, even when your energy screamed no more. But here's what they didn't see coming. That silence didn't make you weaker. It made you precise, because while they thought you were breaking, you were refining. While they believed you were falling apart, you were falling into alignment. They thought their rejection would shut you down, but it tuned you in. They didn't know that every lie they told, every backhanded comment, every energetic chord they sent to keep you stuck, was waking something ancient in you. And now you don't just glow, you radiate, because you remembered the part of you they hoped you'd forget. You remembered that your voice doesn't need volume to carry weight. You remembered that your boundaries aren't cruel, they are sacred architecture. You remembered that your light wasn't given to you by them, and so it can't be taken by them. And that remembering, that changed everything, because the truth is, they didn't break you. They summoned you. With every attack, they called forth a higher version of you. The more they tried to bind, the more you detached. The more they tried to delay, the more you discerned. The more they tried to manipulate, the more you magnetized your truth. They couldn't stop you, so they tried to contain you, not with ropes, but with guilt, with expectations, with the kind of love that came with invisible chains. But your soul said no more, and that no didn't just end cycles, it broke timelines. You stopped repeating, stopped reaching, stopped offering your essence to those who only wanted to sample it. And now they see it. They see the light they tried to silence becoming louder without a single word. They feel it. In your walk, in your eyes, in your peace. You don't react like you used to. You don't explain like before. You don't shrink to fit what you've already outgrown. And that silence, it's loud. That boundary, it's holy. That glow, it's divine evidence. Because what they sent to silence you became your song. You now speak in ways that require no voice. Your frequency speaks first. Your aura answers before your mouth does. And the ones who once controlled the conversation longer know how to reach you. They don't know how to navigate your stillness. They don't understand your clarity. They mistake your calm for weakness. But it's the calm of someone who knows what they carry, knows what they're here to do, knows who they're not taking with them anymore. You've stopped begging for understanding. You've stopped translating your truth for ears that refuse to hear. You've stopped giving soft versions of your light to make others comfortable in their darkness. Because you finally saw it, that some of them didn't hate you, they hated what you awakened in them. Your presence showed them the parts of themselves they abandoned. Your conviction reminded them of every time they stayed silent. You became the mirror, and they couldn't handle the reflection. So they tried to shatter it, tried to silence it, tried to dull the image. But your soul, it sharpened instead. And now you reflect truth so clearly that anything false around you begins to shake. You walk into rooms and the atmosphere shifts. Not because of ego, but because of alignment. And alignment cannot be faked. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be stolen. It is built. And you built yours in the fire. With every setback, with every betrayal, with every tear cried under a moon that never answered back. With every moment you chose not to fight back, but to rise anyway, you became what they feared most, untouchable. Not because you hide, but because you see, because you know, because you no longer need. Not need for approval, not need for validation. Not need for connection that costs you your clarity. You are whole now, and they can't twist whole. They can't reshape what has remembered its true form. So let them talk, let them wonder, let them say, you've changed. Yes, you have. You've remembered. You've returned, you've risen, and the light they tried to silence, it's speaking volumes now, and it doesn't need words. They thought the storm would be the end of you, but the storm was the gate. They thought you'd be buried under the weight. But that weight built the bones of your next becoming. They never imagined that the very thing they sent to break, you would crown you. But chosen one, that's exactly what happened, because you didn't just survive. You ascended, not just in spirit, but in frequency, in clarity, in power. You no longer walk as someone avoiding darkness. You walk as someone who's seen it and stayed whole. You no longer tremble at the idea of being targeted, because now you understand. It was never about punishment. It was about positioning. You were rerouted for your own preservation, disconnected to be recalibrated, shaken, so you could shed what was too small for your assignment. And now they don't know how to reach you, because the path they once used to enter, your self-doubt, your guilt, your overgiving, has been sealed. They come knocking with the same curses, but the door is no longer there. You are not who you were. You are cleaner, sharper, silent in ways that thunder fears, grounded in ways no storm can move. Because what happened to you did not end you. It refined you. It stripped what was borrowed, what was performative, what was never yours to carry. You were never meant to live in reaction. You were meant to live in revelation, and revelation came not through applause, but through pain. It showed you who they were. But more importantly, it showed you who you are, and who you are can no longer be touched by what was, because now, you see how energy works. You feel the shifts before they happen. You read intentions like open books. You listen for silence and hear everything. You become unreachable to what once unraveled you, and they feel it. That's why some still try, still send, still reach. But the version of you they crafted spells for doesn't live here anymore. This version doesn't respond. It redirects. This version doesn't absorb, it reflects. This version doesn't fight back because it doesn't need to. The light you carry now fights for you. It clears paths. It warns before harm arrives. It dissolves connections before they can drain you. It speaks without a word. It protects without needing force, because you are not just protected, you are protection, and now you protect others. Your story is no longer a secret. It's a signal. Every word you speak, every move you make, every boundary you hold sends a message through the spiritual realm. This light will not fold. You have become the one they said wouldn't make it, the one who lost everything, but remembered everything at the same time. You are the proof that no curse outlasts calling, that no ritual overrides realignment, that no whisper against you speaks louder than divine instruction. Because your glow now, it isn't loud, it's final. It doesn't beg to be seen, it commands notice through silence. And your peace, it is your armor, it is your voice, it is your proof. They used black magic, but the universe used it as an activation. They sent intention. The divine sent elevation. They tried to bind you, but all they did was bind themselves to karma. Because you walked out, untouched, unshaken, unapologetically crowned. And the beauty of it is this: you don't need to explain how you made it. Your existence says enough. They'll wonder, they'll gossip, they'll say you changed, and you did. You remembered, you aligned, you ascended, and now your rise cannot be undone. This isn't revenge, it's restoration. This isn't a comeback, it's completion. And your completion is their confusion, so let them sit in wonder. You've got higher things to do, because you weren't just saved, you were chosen. And the chosen don't just survive, they rise until their light becomes law. But here's what they never saw coming, what their spells were never designed to anticipate. They didn't plan for your silence to become strength. They never imagined your isolation would become intimacy with the divine. They couldn't foresee that every shadow they cast would carve a path back to your soul's original brilliance. You became something they couldn't decode, not a threat in the way they understood, but a frequency they could never touch. Because when the chosen one awakens, when the soul remembers not just who it is, but why it came, then all the weapons formed begin to fail. Not because they weren't sharp, but because you stopped standing still. You moved, and in the spirit realm, movement is declaration. It says, I remember. It says, I no longer consent to my own suppression. It says, I was never yours to silence. And that's when heaven begins to roar behind you, not in sound, but in signs, in open doors they can't close, in sudden favor they can't block, in revelations they can't unsee. You began to glow in ways that defied their logic. The very rituals meant to suppress you became accelerants for your destiny, and still, you didn't retaliate. Not because you were weak, but because you understood one sacred truth. To rise without vengeance is to carry divine authority. You could have fought fire. With fire, you could have cursed back, shouted back, hexed back. But you didn't. Instead, you transmuted. You let the darkness reveal what still needed healing. You let the sabotage expose what still needed sealing. And you let every wound become an altar for power. They underestimated what happens when a chosen one bleeds into purpose. Because now your very scars speak. They whisper to those still bound, still bruised, still silenced. They whisper, "This pain is not the end. This darkness is not your identity. This attack is not your truth." They never knew you were anointed for endurance, that your spirit was designed to withstand the very frequency they weaponized. You were not sent here to crumble. You were sent here to be a frequency shift. And now that you've survived what was meant to suffocate you, you carry something rare, a resonance that awakens the sleeping, that breaks energetic cords, that reverses curses without even speaking. You have become a breaker of cycles, a destroyer of timelines not written in love, keeper of divine alignment, and that is what can never be conjured. No matter how many spells are cast, no matter how many names are whispered over flames, no matter how many times they circle back, because every time they return, they find something new, a version of you that has upgraded again, a version of you they can't recognize, because their magic was aimed at your past self, and the past version no longer exists. You are not haunted, you are heralded, you are not cursed. You are called. So let them try again. Let them summon. Let them stir. All they're doing is exposing how small their power is next to divine purpose. Because now, Chosen One, the atmosphere shifts when you enter. Not because you demand attention, but because heaven walks with you. The veil is so thin now, you feel things before they happen. You see truths others miss. You sense misalignment before words are even spoken. You are no longer guessing, you are knowing. That is what makes you powerful in a way they can't understand. Your clarity is your weapon. Your peace is your protection. Your alignment is your shield. You didn't just survive black magic, you rendered it obsolete, because the moment you stopped fearing their rituals, you stripped them of their energy source. Fear is their currency, confusion is their contract, but you paid them no mind. You broke the agreement by remembering your divine worth. And now, you carry an energy that reverses everything meant to harm you. Every room you walk into becomes sanctified. Every interaction becomes a test of intention. Every breath you take sends signals through the ether. This one cannot be touched. You are a living altar now, not a victim of energy, but a channel for divine light. And those who used shadows, they begin to feel exposed in your presence, not because you attack, but because you illuminate. And light doesn't ask for permission. It reveals, it cleanses, it commands. So if they still try, and some will, remember this: the more they send, the more the universe reveals. The more they curse, the more you rise. The more they obsess, the more you ascend, because you've entered the realm of divine reciprocity, where what they send returns faster than it ever did before. Not because you're vengeful, but because you're in alignment, and alignment does not negotiate with darkness. It exposes it. You don't even need to fight them anymore. You only need to walk in your truth. Because when you walk in truth, lies collapse. When you walk in light, shadows scatter. And when you walk in love, everything not rooted in love begins to dissolve. That is your justice. That is your prophecy. That is your revenge. Not to destroy them, but to become untouchable. You see, Chosen One, they used black magic, but your spirit, or it used resurrection. They wrote your ending. But heaven rewrote it in real time, and now you are proof that the darkest spells can birth the brightest light. So rise, not just as a survivor, but as a force, as a mirror, as a reminder that the light wins every time. And now, you've reached the moment no one thought you'd survive. Not because you were weak, but because they expected your silence to last forever. But look at you, still rising, still here, still echoing, and not just here to exist. Here as a force, here as living proof that light never dies in the dark. You are no longer who they attacked. That Version of you, unguarded, unaware, has dissolved, and what remains now cannot be touched. You've become the wall. Their shadows dissolve at your boundary. Their intentions collapse at your feet because your very presence speaks. I remember who I am. And when remembrance takes root, rituals lose reach. You didn't need to shout. You didn't need to fight. You moved. And in the spirit realm, movement is declaration. It says, I am no longer theirs to manipulate. I am no longer consenting to confusion. I walk with alignment. And now the universe answers you in full. With protection they cannot override. With favor they cannot explain. With acceleration they cannot block. You glow now with a light that does not need explanation. The energy you carry now reveals, cleanses, commands. Let them try again. Let them summon. Let them watch. Every time they reach for you, they meet a new version of you. One too awakened to be touched. You are no longer reachable by what once haunted you. You have risen through everything they sent. No more begging. No more blind loyalty. No more wide open gates. You become sacred with your energy, and that makes you untouchable. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. Your very presence is the retribution. You didn't just survive. You transformed, and now you walk in power they never saw coming. Let them wonder. Let them retreat. Let them face what they sent, because chosen one, you are no longer at war. You are at peace. And peace is the highest form of protection.